All right, we are
Great.
live. Welcome back to Derailed, courtesy of Arcaicskidz. I'm, of course, Arcaicskidz, and this is DannyClasic. What's up, my man?
Yeah, I'm doing well. How are you? Thanks for the opportunity. It's you have a late night or what?
What's that?
Do you have a late night or what?
Oh, no, not really. I just worn out today. Yesterday was a rough day, so
Yeah, it was certainly interesting, and I'm sure, like you, sort of from the Twitter perspective, but also from the personal perspective, and the kind of the conversation, obviously, around kind of the Floyd case and what it means, what it means for liberty, what it means for kind of our relationship with the state, and it's a particularly unique scenario where I'm finding myself, I think, more sympathetic to the argument that maybe you make, which is this is that Chauvin was the defendant and the state was the prosecution, right?
yeah.
And that's sort of the frame from the liberty perspective, which I appreciate and understand and makes a lot of sense, and is something that we should be sympathetic towards, is that an agent of the state executed, sort of their argument is literally, but also figuratively, executed on orders of the state, inappropriate use of force towards citizens. And I appreciate that instinct. I understand that instinct. But what I see is a due process failure, is a through the list of charges, how opaque charges themselves are, how sort of random charges themselves are. I mean, sort of the manipulation of language, and how, really we're in sort of a postmodern sense where murder can be unintentional. And I don't understand from a language perspective how we can trust the state to execute justice fairly when we have a charge that that conflicts so deeply, which is unintentional murder. I mean, I actually don't even know what that means.
Yeah, I don't understand that myself. My issue with this situation, first and foremost, I don't care that Chauvin got convicted. I don't have any sympathy for him. Let's put it that way.
Agreed.
However, the problem I see with this situation is that they, in order to even get these charges levied against him, they had to charge him with aggravated assault, which is how they were able to then get the murder 3, murder 2 charges. Yet he wasn't convicted of that. So that seems interesting. And to watch Liberty Twitter, probably more than half, honestly, basically cheer on it. Yeah, basically cheer on the state. I was like, do you not understand that this can set a precedent that will get used against you? Yeah. Because now they don't have to prove your guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. All they have to do is go, well, we're afraid of the mob.
That's right. Yeah. So it's an excellent point. And I kind of break this down conceptually, and I'm lucky enough to have folks in my personal life who are interested in these types of conversations. So I was able to kind of sharpen my thought process prior to this conversation. And I sort of see this there are ways we can break down the argument and the scenario and its ramifications, right? The first is the state's inability to prove beyond a reasonable doubt the conditions that need to be met in order to convict, even on these charges that are suspect themselves. So that's sort of piece number one. I think autopsy results, along with witness testimony and along with contextual testimony, the state did not meet its burden. So there's a proof element, number one, which is concerning. The second, to me, is again what I alluded to a minute ago, which is kind of the revelation of how the state seems to create. We talk about in the liberty movement how the state sort of turns folks into criminals, right? And the parameters that would position actions from being legal to illegal. And the second piece is this sort of unintentional murder, depraved mind burden that I believe gets applied to third-degree murder. These conditions that are created are difficult for me to reconcile because they seem to be the state purveying and reviewing legal scenarios and finding conditions that meet actions in order to prosecute, in order to put people in jail. So that's sort of the second piece. And the third piece is clearly, and probably the most disturbing piece, is clearly there's a chicken or the egg where the mob is dictating that certain actions be taken against a citizen. Again, let's separate. I don't have any love for Derek Chauvin either, and he was probably a bad cop and he was probably a bad person, and I'm not going to lose sleep over him, the man. Who I am going to lose sleep over is him, the defendant, whose conditions within the trial were motivated by a very public, very aggressive, particularly violent mob.
Right.
The mob is why the jury should have been sequestered. It's why the it's why the judge discussed the Maxine Waters comments. It's why the judge discussed the president's words, but simply didn't fail to act on them. And we have a society where a corporate legacy media essentially provides jury intimidation by saying, here are the bios, here are who they are, here are the types of people they work for, etc. So those three pieces, I think you can. I would argue, which I would posit that those three conditions should be particularly disturbing for folks who believe in liberty.
I agree with that, and that's my concern in this situation is that everyone seems to only see the cop, not the defendant. And I have to look at this from a perspective of, okay, fine, he's a cop, I get it, whatever. But in this moment, he's a defendant.
That's right.
And like you posited, this, first of all, there were 3 or 4 times during this trial that should have been an automatic mistrial.
That's right.
And the state would have had an opportunity to come after him again, but his Fifth Amendment rights were absolutely violated, no matter what. I don't care what anyone says. That's not debatable to me. That happened. And I don't understand how someone, my issue on Twitter yesterday and arguing with people was, looking at him as a defendant, as a citizen, right? His Fifth Amendment rights were violated, and they should care about that, because you do not need this precedent set where, well, we don't really have to prove this, and we can kind of do whatever we want. And like you said, we will just make up language to fit an action when it doesn't. It's ridiculous.
That's right. Yeah, it's There's also, so I'll go back to my kind of point number one, which I think leads into the Fifth Amendment argument, which I appreciate. Peace. So I'll kind of talk out of both sides of my mouth a little bit here.
All right.
I'll tend to do that, but it's because I like to speak out my thought process, and again, because we believe in speech. I'm okay with, maybe not getting it perfect the first time because I have to speak it out. So kind of piece number one is, for me, and it leads into the unintentional piece as well, is, for me, I think there's a very clear and obvious environmental scenario that we have here where Chauvin himself and the institution of the police have a vested interest in George Floyd not dying during that altercation, right?
Yeah.
So, so the worst outcome for the Minnesota police, for Derek Chauvin himself, etc., was the death of George Floyd. And what that says to me is that it automatically should eliminate the state's ability to forward a murder charge. I think, and maybe I'm wrong about that. You could probably, someone could probably talk me out of that, but because I don't think it's universal in all scenarios. But in this scenario, again, what the state has to prove in a murder charge, and for now I'll take away some of the specifics, but what the state has to prove in a murder charge amongst any colloquial person who understands what language means, in a murder scenario, what the state has to prove is that there was, some type of disproportionate or intentional force used that would result, in the death of this person, right? And if Floyd wanted to, if Chauvin wanted to kill Floyd, he, you can do that with a gun, you can do that with an actual choke, you can do that with, there are ways that you can kill a person. That is not, how do I manipulate a scenario with a knee to the neck, with a certain amount of pressure, where I will, this person dies, right? I mean, because that's what's happening. So we're assuming that Chauvin is sophisticated enough to come up with an execution plan that will not look like he's actually trying to kill them. And that's something that's sort of blatantly obvious to onlookers and bystanders, is that there's no ability. Sorry, excuse me.
That's right.
Give me 1 second. I'll move him. Sorry. Sorry about that. So there's what the state is assuming, and what the mob is assuming, is that that Chauvin acted to kill this person and was sophisticated enough to do it without shooting him, without choking him, without using it, without using a tool. And I think that's preposterous. And if we're going to use that as the metric that we can apply justice, that's terrifying to me.
Yeah, I agree with you. And one of the things that I noticed yesterday, and I've seen it this morning as well, is a huge amount of people keep saying, well, the medical examiner called it homicide. And I'm like, but homicide doesn't mean murder. Doesn't mean what you think it means. Homicide is it's a legal medical term, and it has nothing to do with, it's the killing of one person by another, regardless of intent or legality. So, you can commit homicide and it's perfectly legal. That's just a term. It doesn't mean it's a criminal act. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. They use that as their argument that, no, they said it was homicide, therein he's guilty of these crimes. That's not what homicide means. So they probably should use those supercomputers to Google something once in a while. No, I am concerned with it. Like I said, it's from a precedent standpoint that we now are in a position where, like you said, the state can manipulate language to fit an action to get a criminal conviction of a citizen. And like it or not, he was a citizen being tried by the state. And we're apparently allowed to completely just walk all over Fifth Amendment rights. That jury was absolutely intimidated. It should have been sequestered the entire time. They were given evidence after the fact, after the prosecution had rested their case and it was the defense's turn. The prosecution added evidence. That's not legal. You're not supposed to do that. So his Fourth Amendment, his Fifth Amendment rights were violated, and this entire thing comes down to, we have sitting congresswomen threatening the jury, essentially.
Yes.
To you better do what you're told or else. And as you said, you also have the media out there doxing them, essentially.
Yes.
They're like, well, we can't give you their name or whatever, but we can tell you all of these things.
Everything about them. Yeah.
Which is very easy to figure out who the people are.
That's right. Age, occupation. I was reading another story, and it was funny because also on Twitter, I sort of got some pushback again. It said, hey, well, everyone's doing that. I think the original, Liberty Lockdown, I think shared, that sort of Minnesota or Minneapolis Star article, which was probably the worst offender because it went into far more other specifics. But someone said, hey, everyone does this, and shared, a Fox News article. And the idea that I would care, or that it was positioned as such to say, hey, don't you love Fox News? Here's a media outlet you do like who's doing this. And the idea that I love Fox News or what is funny is just fun, is a funny thing. I think I responded with that. that Goodfellas like laughing, gif, which is my favorite.
Yeah.
And the flip side is there's the idea that, again, every media engages in this malfeasance, makes it okay. Again, is like, what are we doing here? Why?
Yeah, it doesn't make it
in what
okay.
way is that excusable? That doesn't make any sense. And I'll go back, and I know we're gonna speak in a little more macro sense in a minute, which I appreciate. But from the specific sense as well, again, a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, whose opinion I respect and value, and I think is a smart guy, comes down on the conviction side, which is okay. Reasonable people disagree. But his proof was that, again, just what you said. The examiner mentioned homicide, mentioned, that the knee to the neck produced death, which I think is sort of speculative at best. But within the testimony itself, the examiner mentions that that Floyd's heart was enlarged, that there was there was scarring on the pulmonary arteries, etc., and specifically said that a normal heart and a normal pulmonary system would not have responded in a fatality based on the pressure of the knee. And what my friends and the state's argument is that the knee contributed to the death, which I understand intellectually. What I can't square away is that knees to a neck, or knees, are a tool with which we can reliably predict homicide. And what the result of that is, from a state perspective, is when death results from any action, benign, malevolent, or otherwise, we can then apply a conviction. Is really scary. The metaphor that I used was, if I get into some type of altercation, with an anemic, and I have no idea that this person's anemic, and I push them, and again, I've assault, and we can talk about the state. The state can make can clearly make a legal argument that an assault was made. I pushed this person, that it caused bodily harm, and if this person bleeds out because they're anemic, I'm a murderer. And this is an apt analogy, I believe. I don't think there's a flaw in this analogy. I don't know that it's perfect, but I don't know that there's any holes in it either. And what it says is that otherwise non-malevolent, or at least non-homicidal actions, simply because the byproduct of which results in an anomalous death, can be brought to conviction and can then be used to put you in jail and take your liberties around. That's bad. That's not good.
That's the situation that I've been looking at for this entire time, was that when they basically have decided that, one, we no longer have to reach the burden of proof necessary for this conviction, but we can also just scare jurors into doing what we think is best. And then, like you said, when they put themselves in a position, and I thought your analogy was apt. I was speaking with my wife this morning, and I said, this verdict puts makes a bad situation worse, because now if I'm in a position where I have to use violence, even for self-defense, I'd better hope that that person on the other side of this altercation, skin color matches mine.
Sure. Yeah.
Because otherwise, I'm burnt. I mean, it doesn't matter if it was legal or not. They're going to say, well, unfortunately, we don't want the city to burn, so we're going to have to lock you up.
Yeah, and that's a good macro point, and I'll even dive a little deeper again on the micro point. I'm annoying when it comes to this stuff, but you also have to hope that a person that you engage in any type of physical confrontation with, offensive or defensive, is as healthy as they could possibly be, because and the result of your confrontation is disproportionate based on the fact that individual is not fit. That's now evidence enough to prosecute you from an aggravated perspective, from a homicide, from a murder perspective, we're able to increase the ability of the state's argument against you. You have to hope that you're not pushing an anemic person or a sick person or an asthmatic person or whatever.
Right. You have to take you're in a position now after this verdict that their medical conditions are on their burden for you.
That's right.
Their medical conditions can be used against you at a later point in time, and that's kind of terrifying.
This is the point. This is I'm kind of getting goosebumps as it happens. Is we can't argue from a liberty perspective that individuals have their own sovereignty to moderate disputes. Obviously, in every instance, we need harm reduction, we need violence reduction, we need to ensure that the confrontations that we do have are as peaceful as possible. But we also have to understand and recognize that there is a real place and utility for physical confrontation in society, and if the only owner of physical violence is the state, and I am not allowed to use physical confrontation as a tool, as a citizen, because I have to ensure that that I meet the state's definition for physical violence based on the fact that I could cause disproportionate harm to someone based on their own medical condition, that you can't have liberty.
No, you can't.
That's complete monopoly on the state.
Yeah. My situation yesterday, like I said before, it was, I was highly irritated at watching all these people celebrate the state, changing the rules basically during this trial. And it's like, you're celebrating it. First of all, you're celebrating the state. That's gross. I don't care. Yeah. And secondly, you don't seem to understand, or I don't think they understand. And I'm kind of hoping that the debate with Jeremiah will give more clarity of my positioning on that. Is the repercussions are what I'm more worried about. Now, I don't care about Chauvin. He was an awful person.
Agreed. Yes.
But the problem is that all judges, all case law is made in these situations. I hate the fact that we use precedent, like, oh, well, it worked for this person, so let's just apply the same thing. That's ridiculous. But that's what they do. And so my outlook on this is, why are you celebrating such a terrible precedent that was just set in Minnesota? Not just that we can use mob rule to get a conviction, but also that like you said, we will change language to fit in action. Like you had said, okay, so one of the things that I found out from reading the autopsy was that Floyd's lungs were nearly 3 times the normal weight. And that doesn't come from someone being on your back. You know what I mean? No, that was from his inflamed heart. That was from his drug addiction. My understanding is fentanyl has a huge role in the lung situation. So it is true he probably couldn't breathe, right?
Yeah,
that's probably accurate.
Right.
The difference is, or the issue to me is, they basically said that Chauvin caused George Floyd's death. That's what the jury said. Oh, yeah, you're right. He did. Here's the problem. You can't medically prove that.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And beyond a reasonable doubt has to stand for something. Now, I saw a tweet this morning from someone that I highly respect. And she said that the jury, they had to convict right or wrong for their own self-defense. And it's an interesting thought. I mean, I can understand seeing it that way.
What's the argument? Sorry.
She had tweeted that the jury had to convict Chauvin right or wrong for their own self-defense.
So meaning they needed to act in a way that would protect themselves physically from the mob. Is that what you mean?
Right. And that's an argument to be made. I can understand that.
It's a shitty argument, but it's an
yes. I mean, what I'm saying is, it's I think a lot of people, and including the jury, I think that's what is in their head. It's like, well, we'll sacrifice this one person to save us. It's like, okay, so you just threw the virgin in the volcano. I get it.
Man, yeah. I mean, I really, as again, I think, you said, you're married. I have a wife as well. I have 2 kids. I apologize again. I have a dog that's loud, so apologies. I really understand. I really do, truly, not a platitude. Understand utilitarian arguments, and also I understand arguments for, ceding ground and living to fight another day. But what that does is it doesn't only misapply justice in this case. It also confirms the misapplication of process from a sequestering and mistrial perspective. And it also, I don't know how much you know or like about Jordan Peterson, but I'm a massive fan, and I'm a Jordan Peterson.
I've got his first book in there on my bookshelf.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and I will. I mean, I hope we'll develop a longer relationship. He's a massive influence in my life. And something that he said recently is, compromising your principles and your speech and your actions, even in utilitarian concepts. So even if you can conceptually separate, I am doing this because it is a practical application and I need to do it now, even though I don't believe it, right? There are people who make those decisions all the time. I understand them, and I do it sometimes. But be really, really careful when you do it, because even the act of separating the action and the psychology pathologizes you. The more you act in a way against your principles, the more you erode your principles. And when we do scale, that's a recipe for that's a recipe.
Well, and that's what I see just happened, is that that's I think what a lot of people did is they said, well, better him than me, kind of an argument. Yeah. And I think the jury was probably feeling the exact same way. One of the things that I've consistently said from yesterday, when people have told me that I'm wrong and that the state proved their case, which fine, if you believe that, then I don't know what to tell you, but I've said this and I will continue to say it. These people would way rather have me on their jury than I would have them on mine.
Yeah, that's right. Yes,
because I understand the risk situation that these jurors were in. I understand that. I don't care. My principles are too important. And if the mob is going to come after me because I didn't do what they wanted, well, then that's just the way that it's going to have to be.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So, that's one of these things that I was arguing on Twitter for a couple of hours, and then Stacy was the first person to back me up, and I've been on her show a few times. She's been on mine. She's a great person. She's also a former criminal defense attorney. And so when she's going, look, guys, I understand this from the legal side too.
Sorry, Austin. Let me just push him out real quick. I'm really sorry. Hold on. Okay, hold on. All right. Okay, sorry about that.
No problem. But yeah, like I was saying, Stacy was the first one to come to my defense, and then finally Pete Quinones also stepped in it with me. But it showed a lot of people. It pulled the mask down on a lot of people, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Where it's like I'm not okay blood sacrificing anyone. To either because you didn't like what the person's job was, or that the mob's going to burn down cities, which, by the way, they rioted in Portland anyway. So
correct.
It's like, they're looking for an excuse. They're going to find it. I'm not okay with blood sacrifice, and that's what I see this to be.
Yeah. So, and it's interesting too, and it leads into it. So I'm not sure how you can, I am new to kind of I'm new to Twitter, to be honest with you. And I've actually,
it's a hell site.
Yeah. And I have no other social, I don't say this to like be a hipster or avant-garde or anything. I don't have any other social media, and I don't, I just started this YouTube channel myself with a buddy of mine, which, people can watch or not.
Yeah, I didn't see that in your bio or anything, so I couldn't put it in the description, but I do have your Twitter in there.
Yeah, we'll send it. Thank you. And we'll do it again. I suck at this, and that's like, I don't even want people to watch it because it's like it's like
practice, buddy, practice.
Yeah, and I'd rather just speak to you and just kind of talk it through. But anyway, so the point is, I sort of consider myself sort of an Edmund Burke conservative. I still fall and consider myself a conservative, I guess, if you want to put that. I think sort of practically and functionally, a lot of my instincts are liberty driven. I don't think I'm a libertarian, although my opinions and my thoughts evolve and change all the time. And it's interesting to me, again, from a groupthink perspective, which I think you hit on, and what I applaud you for being more vocal about, particularly last night, is I understand the kind of all cops are bastards. Cops from a institutional perspective are the enforcement mechanism of the state. I get it. I really do. I really, really, really do. What we can't allow ourselves to, what we can't let intellectually bankrupt us is the fact that this is not a cop institution question. This is a Fifth Amendment question. This is a state prosecutorial question. And we can't engage in the same type of mental gymnastics that sort of statists and progressives indulge themselves in when an enemy class is the one on the hot seat.
Right.
That's what sort of liberty and libertarian Twitter did last night, is allowed their emotional attachment to the visceral reaction around cops to muddy their intellectual waters to the point where they are fighting against this, where they're rooting for the state's ability to put someone in jail. And that, and again, I love the Michael Malices of the world. I really get it. Again, I do, but I can't help but be intellectually curious around the principled consistency of people who I normally like. And it doesn't mean that I don't like them either. It doesn't mean, I am actually, again, sort of O'Sullivan's law. I think actual real conservatives are to our vast detriment. Don't get me wrong, but conservatives are behaviorally more tolerant than almost anyone else. Meaning I'm okay with you. I'm okay with you having that opinion. I'm okay. I like the all cops are bastard, Twitter posts because some of them are funny, and it's like, even though I don't agree with that, it's like, that's fine. I think it's funny, but you see it spun around, and you see, again, kind of the Dave Smiths of the world, who I like, the Michael Malices of the world, who I like, saying things like, well, it's okay that he went to jail. And it's like, well, what is that? What is that?
I don't, one of the things is that, I told Stacy, I said, there are certain times where you find out where people's principles really lie. And this is one of those times that I've saw a lot of people saying things that I just can't get behind. One thing about it is I can disagree with them, and we can still work together for a better future. But like you had noted that Peterson said, when you pass on your principles once, it starts to erode them, and eventually you won't have any, and you won't have a leg to stand on when it's something worse, when it's vaccine passports.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. Yeah.
So you're going to have a problem. I am going to have to let you go now.
Sure.
I do have a call coming up in a few minutes. But I definitely want to do this again. Maybe sometime this evening if you're free or something.
Okay.
But I do have that debate. I believe it's at 3 p.m. Eastern. So
okay.
I don't know. Maybe you should tune in and someone in the chat. Yeah, it's going to be live streamed.
Okay, cool.
Get some people to tune in that are kind of see it more in my direction, so I'm not completely outgunned in the chat.
Okay. Sure.
So I do look forward to it, but he picked the moderator. It's on his channel, so I'm like,
okay.
that's going to be interesting.
I'll definitely see if I can make it. Again, I apologize for my ancillary.
Oh, it's no problem, man. I've my son just turned 16
Nice.
and March 31st. So I actually have a stream, a show that I did with my son on his 16th birthday, which was hilarious.
Cool.
So,
Very cool.
All right, man. I really appreciate this, and we'll definitely have to do this again. So
that sounds good. Thanks very much.
All right, buddy. Yeah. Bye.
Okay. Yeah.